Hello, welcome. If you enjoy these stories and want to support my work, we have an exclusive subscriber-only group and bonus episodes where I read classic books and true stories at length. Feel free to join on Facebook or Patreon. It's a small way to contribute. I mean, no pressure, only if you want to. Link in the description. You know the hair, you know the tongue stuck out at the camera, you know E equals MC squared. But there was a woman standing just outside that photograph, a physicist, and history closed the door on her so gently that hardly anyone heard it click. Mileva Maric. Have you ever feared that the truest work of your life would go unseen? That the person you were capable of becoming would simply never get her chance? And that no one would even notice the theft, because nothing technically was ever stolen? Tonight we explore her genius, why Einstein could not have made his scientific discoveries without her help, and why you have never heard her name. Because the reason you've never heard of her is not the reason you think. Zurich, Switzerland. The 4th of August, 1948. On a quiet street in a small apartment, an old woman is dying. She is 72 years old. She has suffered a stroke. The neighbors on the stair know her, a little, the way you know a person you have never quite met. A reserved private woman with a limp who gave piano lessons to the neighborhood children and mathematics lessons to the ones who struggled with their sums. A woman who spent everything she had, her money, her health, and the long, slow decades of her one life, on a son the world had quietly put away. What the neighbors do not know is who she was. They do not know that half a century ago, this woman sat in a lecture hall, where no woman was supposed to sit. The only one among all the men. And she matched the best of them. They do not know that she once read The Unwritten Future of Physics by candlelight, at a shared desk, beside a young man the whole world would come to worship. They do not know that her name, the name almost no one will trouble to carve in stone when she is gone, is Mileva Maric. The most famous man of the 20th century once wrote to her in his own hand that she was a creature who is my equal. So how does the equal of Albert Einstein come to die in a small room, in poverty, so completely forgotten that even her grave will one day lose its stone? Welcome, nightlings. This is Huxley. If you like listening or falling asleep to real stories that will reveal life's deeper truths, then this is the place for you. Consider subscribing and let the next story find you when you need it most. This episode was suggested by one of our Patreon supporters, Natasha. I appreciate it. I never knew how much Mileva Maric influenced Einstein's work. She had an extraordinary life. Now, back to the story. She was born on the 19th of December, 1875, in a town called Tittel, a small place in the flat green country of Vojvodina, in what was then the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and is now Serbia. Her father was a man named Miloš Maric, once a soldier, then a court clerk, a careful man, good with documents, who had married well. Her mother, Maria, came from land and from money, and into that comfortable house Mileva arrived as the eldest of the children. She should have had, by every measure of her world, an ordinary and pleasant girlhood. But two things marked her early and set her apart. The first was her body. She was born with a dislocation of the left hip. The leg would grow shorter than its partner, and she would walk, for every single step of her life, with a limp. She wore, it said, a built-up shoe, and children, being children in every century, noticed. They teased. So before she was old enough to understand why, Mileva learned the particular loneliness of the child who moves through the schoolyard just a little differently than the rest. And the second thing was her mind. Because this quiet, limping, watchful girl turned out to be a prodigy. Not merely clever, not merely quick. A genuine talent for mathematics and for physics. The kind of mind that meets a hard problem and leans toward it, the way the rest of us lean away. And here, Nightlings, is where the whole shape of her life first announces itself. Because she had this extraordinary gift, in a time and in a place that had built no room for it. The Austro-Hungarian Empire did not educate its daughters in higher things. The doors to the good schools, the real schools, the ones that led somewhere, those doors were for boys. It was not a matter of debate. It was simply the architecture of the world. A girl with a mind like Mileva's was rather like a river arriving at a wall. So her father went to work, not with a hammer, with a pen, with petitions. In 1891, he secured a special permission for his daughter to enroll as a private student at an all-male gymnasium in Zagreb. In February of 1894, another special permission, this one to allow her, a girl, to sit in on the physics lectures reserved for the young men. And that September, she took her final examinations and earned the highest marks in the entire school in mathematics and in physics. The highest, above every boy who had been entitled to be there. But I want you to notice something, and to hold on to it, because it is the thread we will follow all the way to the end tonight. Every single door in Mileva's childhood was opened for her by a man's petition, her father asked. The authorities considered. A stamp came down, and she was allowed in. Allowed in, never entitled to be in. Do you feel the difference? Entitlement is a door that is simply yours. You walk through it without a thought. Permission is a door that someone, each time, decides whether to open. And a life lived entirely on permission is a life spent standing, always, just outside the door, waiting to hear whether today, this once, you may enter. And here I have to be fair to the age she was born into, because it would be easy and it would be lazy to make a villain of it. The empire that barred her wasn't cruel to Mileva. Not really. It didn't hate her. It simply had never thought of her. It had built its schools and its examinations and its careers for a certain kind of person, and she was not that person, and so the whole vast machine had no shelf to put her on. There's even a strange, quiet comedy in it, when you step back. An entire imperial bureaucracy, with its seals and its official letters, laboring to produce a stamped document granting one small girl permission to hear about physics, as though knowledge were a border, and she a traveler without the right papers. But the papers kept coming. Her father kept asking and the doors kept opening, one petition at a time. There was only one problem with a life like that. Sooner or later, you must sense it already, the petitions run out. Sooner or later, she would want to walk through a door that no father could open for her. And there was, in all of Europe, exactly one German-speaking country where a woman could walk through the front doors of a university without a letter of permission from any man at all. So Mileva packed her things and she turned towards Switzerland. She fell ill in 1894, the body that had troubled her from birth troubling her again. And it was partly this that turned her toward the move. But Switzerland was more than a change of air. Switzerland was, in that narrow moment of history, the open door. She arrived, enrolled at the girls' high school in Zurich in the November of 1894, and set about the ordinary heroic business of catching up. In 1896, she passed her Matura, the examination that unlocked the university. She tried a semester of medicine first, but medicine could not hold her. Physics reached out and took her back, the way a first language does, and she went. And in the autumn of 1896, at 20 years old, Mileva Maric walked into a room she was never supposed to reach. The Zurich Polytechnic. Section 6A, the course that trained teachers of mathematics and physics. Now, I want to slow down here because this is the summit of the sunlit part of her story, and she earned every step of the climb. She was the 5th woman ever admitted to that section, the 5th in all its history. And in her own class, her cohort, the little band of students who would sit together and rise or fall together, there were 6 of them, 5 young men, and Mileva, the only woman in the room. Sit with that a moment, because it holds both halves of her whole life at once. On the one hand, triumph, pure and undeniable. The girl who had needed a stamped letter simply to overhear a physics lecture in Zagreb had crossed half a continent and seated herself, by right of her Matura, in one of the finest scientific classrooms in Europe. No petition, no father at the door, just her name on the roll. And on the other hand, the loneliness that lives inside every only, because to be the only one of your kind in a room is a strange doubled feeling. You have arrived, and you have arrived alone. There is no one across the aisle who knows exactly what it took. You are in the room, but you are never quite of it. And the asterisk, that little mark of yes but, was never far behind her. In the winter of 1897 and 98, she travelled to Heidelberg, to the great university there, to deepen her physics, and even that she could only do as a Gasthörerin, a guest listener. Because in Germany, women still could not properly enroll at all. To sit in each professor's lecture, she needed that professor's own personal permission. Picture it, a line of learned German gentlemen, each one gravely deciding, one at a time, whether a single Serbian woman might be permitted to hear them describe the behavior of gas molecules. She heard Philipp Lenard lecture there, a man who would one day win the Nobel Prize on the kinetic theory of gases. She drank it in, and then, in 1898, she went back to Zurich to her class of 6. And it was in that class, I'll mention him now, quietly, the way he first appeared in her life without fanfare, that she sat near a certain young man, rumpled, irreverent, a little younger than the rest, 3.5 years younger than she was, in fact. A boy who did not much care for authority, and did not always bother to hide it. He had a way of looking at her. His name was Albert. I'll say nothing more about him yet. There will be time. Only this. Mileva had crossed half of Europe to enter that room. She had petitioned and passed and travelled and endured to earn her chair in it. And she could not possibly have known, on those first bright mornings, that the most dangerous thing in that lecture hall was not the examiners who would one day judge her. It was the boy in the second row who kept looking up. Come closer to the lamp for this one, because for a little while, a few short years, the story warms. It began as friendship, not romance. Two people who did not quite fit anywhere else, finding that they fit rather well beside each other. One writer called them kindred spirits, aloof scholars, outsiders both. And outsiders recognize one another the way travelers from the same distant country recognize an accent in a crowd. And what drew them together, of all the things in the world, was homework they hadn't been assigned. The Polytechnic taught its physics, but there was a newer physics stirring beyond the edges of the syllabus. Maxwell, Boltzmann, Drude, Helmholtz, names that carried the future in them. And the professors, comfortable men, weren't much interested. So Albert and Mileva went looking on their own. In the evenings, over coffee gone cold and books open on a single shared desk, they read the things no one had told them to read. They argued. They worked it through together line by line, 2 minds and 1 candle. And somewhere in all that, friendship tipped over into love. By around the autumn of 1899, they were lovers. And the letters, oh, the letters survive, and they are so tender it almost hurts to read them. He becomes Johnny to her. She becomes Doxel to him, his little doll. In August of 1899, he writes to her of their reading together, "I find the collaboration very good." The next autumn, thinking of her studies, he writes how proud he will be. His words, "To have a little PhD for a sweetheart." And then, in October of 1900, the line that crowns them all. Albert Einstein writes to Mileva Marriage that she is, and hold these words, nightlings, because this story will make you weigh them again and again before the night is through. A creature who is my equal, as strong and independent as I am, his equal. He said it plainly, and at the time he meant it plainly. And here is what makes it more than a lover's flattery. The record agrees with him. In the intermediate examinations of 1899, Mileva's grade in physics was a 5.5. And so was Albert's. The same, exactly the same. Let that sit one quiet beat in the warm light. The woman history would spend a century either forgetting or misremembering scored In physics, precisely what Albert Einstein scored. Not in his shadow. Beside him, at the same desk, on the same page. And she had her own ambitions. Hers, not borrowed from anyone. Around this time, she writes a line I find very moving in its plainness. "I am glad," she says, "of the research which is ahead of me." Ahead of her. She could see it there, the road of her own life's work, stretching out in front of her like a lit hallway. She wasn't standing outside anyone's door now. She had her own to walk through. There's a smile in this chapter too, if you look for it, because their idea of courtship was to sit and quarrel about electrodynamics over cold coffee. And honestly, who am I to judge? Every couple has its love language. Some send flowers. These two sent each other into the guts of Maxwell's equations and found it the most romantic thing in the world. Two students, one desk, one shared future, opening out ahead of them both. But a future like that, in their world, had to pass through a single narrow room first. The examiners, everything, the equal grades, the research ahead of her, the whole lit hallway, everything now depended on one exam. July 1900. The final examinations for the teaching diploma. This was the door at the end of the corridor. Pass, and you were a certified teacher of mathematics and physics. You were at last in with the paper to prove it. Fail, and the corridor simply stopped. Albert sat the exam, and Albert passed. Not brilliantly, I should say. His average was a 4.91, the very last of the 5 candidates who got through. But he got through. The door opened and he walked into the rest of his life. Mileva sat the same exam, and Mileva did not pass. Her overall average was a 4.0. And the wound, the decisive wound, was a single number. A 2.5 in the theory of functions, the mathematics component. One low grade in one subject, dragging the whole beneath the line. Now, I want to be careful and honest with you here, because this is where the easy version of the story wants to take over. The version where wicked examiners conspired to fail the woman. The research doesn't support that, and I won't hand you a lie, however satisfying it might feel. There's no evidence anyone cheated her in that room. But I will tell you the plain shape of what happened, and let it do its own quiet work. 5 young men sat that examination. 4 of them received their diplomas, and the only woman in the group did not. Say it slowly. The 4 men passed. The 1 woman failed, and in the theory of functions, the subject that sank her, no one else in that little cohort scored below a 5.5. She alone fell there. I don't tell you that to accuse anyone. I tell you because it is the same shape again, isn't it? The room she'd fought her way into for years. And this time the door closing. Not slammed by an enemy, but closing all the same, and closing cruelly from the inside. She was in the building. She simply could not get the paper that would let her stay. And as if fate had timed it, a second door was swinging shut in the very same season. Because Albert's mother, Pauline, had learned of the romance, and Pauline was appalled. Albert wrote down her words himself in a letter that July, and they are hard to hear. "By the time you're 30, his mother said of Mileva, she'll be an old witch." There was more where that came from. Mileva was too old for him. In Pauline's eyes, too Serbian, too orthodox, too buried in her books. And yes, the limp counted against her too. No decent family, the mother said, would have her. Neither of these was a villain twirling a moustache. An examination grade is not malice. A worried mother is not a monster. Pauline wanted for her boy the ordinary safe life mothers everywhere want. But laid side by side, the failed exam and the mother's contempt, they were two doors closing on the same young woman in the same summer. Merit on one side and a single number outweighing it. Love on the other, and an old prejudice outweighing that. And here, this matters. Albert did not leave, not yet. Whatever his mother said, he stood by Mileva. He defended her. In these years, he is still the boy who wrote My Equal, and he means it. So all was not lost. She could sit the examination again. There was still hope, still a road, still the research that was supposed to be ahead of her. She would go back into that room one more time and try once more for the door. But the next time she walked in to face the examiners, she would be carrying a secret. One she could tell no one. In the May of 1901, before she sat the examination again, Albert and Mileva went to the lakes, Lake Como. The water like a held breath between the mountains, the spring coming on warm and green all around them. It was, by every account, a happy few days. Two lovers, still bound by Johnny and Doxel, walking beside the oldest and most patient water in the world. A lakeside. A season. A little while stolen out of a hard life. And there was a consequence. By the time they came down from the mountains, Mileva was carrying a child. Now, I need you to feel what that meant in 1901, because it is nearly impossible to feel it from where we sit. She was unmarried. She was Serbian. She was a foreigner in a foreign country, an orthodox woman among people who already whispered about her. To be pregnant and unwed in her world, this was not an awkwardness. It was not a scandal to be smoothed over. It was a catastrophe. It was the kind of thing that could close every remaining door at once. And she had one more door still to try. Because in July of that year, roughly 3 months along, nauseated, frightened, and hiding all of it behind the same reserved and quiet face the neighbors would one day mistake for coldness, Mileva Maric walked back into the examination room. One last attempt at the diploma. One last reach for the paper that would let her stay. She failed again. The same average as before, a 4.0. No improvement. And this time, there would be no third attempt. She let it go. All of it. She had been working on a doctoral dissertation too, on heat conduction under Professor Weber, and she set that down as well. put out the light on it. And here, nightlings, I have to close, quietly, a door we opened together a little while ago. Do you remember? At the warm desk, in the candlelight, she wrote that lovely line. I am glad of the research, which is ahead of me. Ahead of her. That lit hallway of her own life's work, stretching out in front of her. It was not ahead of her anymore. In one terrible summer, it had all moved silently behind her. The physics, the diploma, the doctorate, the career, the whole future she could once see so clearly. Gone. Not stolen by a thief. Just closed off. One failed exam and one impossible pregnancy at a time. She was 25 years old, and the research that was ahead of her was now the life she would not get to live. Around the end of January 1902, in her parents' house in Novi Sad, home at last among her own people, Mileva gave birth to a daughter. They called her Liesel. Albert did not come. He was elsewhere, beginning a career, and he never made the journey. In fact, and this is one of the strangest, saddest facts in the whole story, Albert Einstein is not known ever to have laid eyes on his own first child. Not once. He wrote about her tenderly from a distance. Is she healthy? He asked in a letter. And does she cry properly? What are her eyes like? I love her so much, and I don't even know her yet. I love her so much, and I don't even know her yet. He never did come to know her. And then, in September of 1903, there is one last mention of the little girl in the letters. A passing reference, something about scarlet fever going around. And after that, nothing. Liesel simply vanishes. She falls out of the historical record entirely, as though a hand had closed over her. Did she die of the fever there in Serbia? A baby not yet 2? Was she given up, quietly adopted out, to spare an unwed mother the ruin? No one knows. And I mean that plainly, the way I always try to be plain with you. No one knows. I don't know. The historians don't know. Some doors, history closes even on the historians, and stands in front of them and will not say what is behind. Here is the part that stops the breath. The world did not even know this child had ever existed. Not until 1986, when those hidden love letters finally came to light. For over 80 years, a little girl named Liesel was a secret so complete that history didn't know to grieve her. So we will not resolve her tonight. I will not pretend to a knowledge I don't have. She will simply stay with us, a small unanswered ache, as the rest of the story goes on. Because that is what she was to Mileva too. Not a chapter that closed, a silence she carried. And what Albert offered, instead of that journey to Novi Sad, was the one thing that might at least make the next child safe. He offered, at last, a wedding. The 6th of January, 1903. Bern, Switzerland. A registrar's office. That is where they were married. Not a church, not a great hall. A small civil ceremony in a government room, done against the wishes of his family. And here is the detail I want you to hold gently, and then let go of, because Mileva did exactly that. No family came. Not one. not his mother Pauline, who had called her an old witch, not Mileva's own people back in Serbia. The witnesses were two friends, Solovin and Habicht, companions from a little club of theirs, and that was the whole of the wedding party. A marriage with no mother on either side of the aisle. Say it once, softly, and move on. Because she did. And then came the burn years, and I'll tell you the truth. For a while, there was a real small happiness in them. Albert had a job now. Not a professorship. No university had wanted him, our great genius, not yet. He'd taken a post at the Swiss Patent Office, examining other people's inventions. His title was Technical Expert, Third Class. Third class. There's a smile in that, isn't there? The man who was about to rewrite the universe, spending his days rendering official judgment on somebody's improved bottle cap. But it was steady. It was theirs. And Mileva made a home. She kept the household together, and she hosted the noisy evenings when Albert's friends, they grandly called themselves the Olympia Academy, crowded in to argue philosophy and physics into the small hours. She was in the thick of that. And on the 14th of May, 1904, their son was born, Hans Albert, a healthy boy, in a home that for once the world had stopped closing doors on. Her letters from this time, written to her dearest friend, a woman named Helene Savich, the keeper of Mileva's truest voice across all these years. Her letters show real pride, real partnership. She belonged to something. And there is one small thing in those early years I want to lay down carefully now, because it will matter later. And I'd rather plant it gently than spring it on you. Back in 1900, there had been a little scientific paper on capillarity, and when Mileva wrote to Helene about it, she used a particular word. She said we. We also sent a copy to Boltzmann, she wrote, and we would like to know what he thinks of it. We, the two of them, in it together, as they were in everything then. But the paper, when it went out into the world, went out under Albert's name. His alone. I don't hand you that to make you angry. Not yet, not here. I only want you to hold the shape of it, the we in her private letter, and the single name on the public page. Remember it. We'll need it. And that, really, was the quiet architecture of this happy, narrowed life. No one forbade Mileva anything now. There was no examiner, no petition, no locked gate. It was gentler than that, and stranger. It was simply that all the doors still open to her now led to the same place. The kitchen, the nursery, the reading chair by the lamp. She read a great deal in those evenings. Mileva did. The two of them did. And I'll confess, I'm rather fond of that image. Two tired people and a shared book at the end of a long day. It's a thing I do myself, you know, over on Patreon. I read the old classics there in full, cover to cover. The Meditations of Marcus Aurelius among them, for the nightlings who like to fall asleep inside a whole book rather than a piece of one. And if you're a subscriber there, you can ask me for a particular one, a book you've always meant to read but never quite had the quiet for. And I will do, but that's for another evening. Back to the lamplit flat in Bern. Because it was from exactly this table, the dishes cleared, the baby finally asleep, two physicists talking late into an utterly ordinary evening, that something was about to rise. Something the physicists still speak of, even now, the way believers speak of a miracle. 1905. The scientists have a name for it. The Annus Mirabilis, the miracle year, because in that single year, from that small burn flat and that third-class patent desk, Albert Einstein published 4 papers, and each one of them broke the world open a little wider. The photoelectric effect, the one that would in the end win him the Nobel Prize. Brownian motion, the special theory of relativity, and almost as an afterthought, the short paper that gave us the most famous equation ever written, the one about mass and energy being secretly the same thing. 4 papers, 1 year, 1 young man at a kitchen table. But let me bring the camera home, off the great man and back into the room, where the lamp is, where she is, because their son, Hans Albert, remembered something about this time. He remembered that his parents would work together in the evenings at the same table. At the same table. And it is a matter of record, not legend, record, that some of Einstein's early lecture notes, and later a 1910 draft of a reply to the physicist Max Planck, survive to this day, written out in Mileva's handwriting. Her hand. She checked. She copied. She listened across that table, and she questioned. She was his first sounding board, and this is the thing the world keeps forgetting. She was a trained physicist, fully equipped to understand every word of what she was hearing. And there is a line. The line, really. The one that has launched 1,000 arguments, and I promised you I'd hand it over with all its truth intact. So here it is whole. Back in March of 1901, Albert had written to her, "How happy and proud I will be when the two of us together will have brought our work on relative motion to a victorious conclusion." Our work on relative motion. You can hear why people seize on it. It sounds, doesn't it, like the smoking gun, like proof that relativity was theirs. But hold it up to the light and be honest with it. That letter is from 1901, 4 years before the theory of relativity existed. In 1901, Albert still believed in the ether, an invisible substance that physicists then thought filled all of space. And relative motion meant the motion of the Earth relative to that ether. It was one of the great open problems of the day. Half the physicists in Europe were chasing it. It was not the 1905 theory. It could not have been. And when Albert did, at last, sit down to describe the real theory taking shape in his mind, that December, listen to the pronoun he chose. Not our. He wrote of my ideas, the method that I have proposed, my I. The plural was the language of their love. The singular was the language of the work. When the work finally came, and when the special relativity paper appeared in print in 1905, this thing that would remake all of physics, it carried no co-author's name. And in its thanks, its one small note of gratitude, Einstein thanked a friend, my friend and colleague, Monsieur Bessot. Michel Bessot, a good man, and a real help to him. Not Mileva. Her name is not in it. Let that absence just ring there for a moment. I won't accuse anyone of anything. I'll only let it ring. And I'll tell you one more thing about that miraculous house, and then I'll move on quickly, because it is only a single quiet note, and it doesn't want dwelling on. In that same home, in that same year, the universe was being rewritten. There was already an older silence. A daughter, not 2 years gone from the letters, never spoken of again. The year Albert Einstein bent space and time, no one in that flat wrote a single word to Novi Sad. That's all. One heartbeat. Move on. Because what was said across that table, in those evenings, the true weight and texture of it, no archive holds, no letter recorded it, and I won't guess, and I confess I distrust anyone who claims they can. But a century later, that one plural pronoun, our work, would drag this quiet, reserved woman into the middle of a trial that history is, even now, still conducting. I want to do something careful now, and I want you to stay right here with me in the dark while I do it. Because there is a story about Mileva that has spread all across the world. You may even have arrived tonight believing it, and I am going to take it, very gently, out of your hands. Not to win an argument. I have no one to defeat here. I only want to lift a costume off her, so that the real woman underneath can finally be seen. The story goes like this. That Mileva Maric secretly wrote Einstein's equations. That relativity was truly hers, or half hers, and that a brilliant woman was robbed, her genius stolen, her name scrubbed off the greatest work of the century by the man who married her. And I understand completely why people love that story. I do. Because wanting it to be true is, itself, a kind of love for her. It's the heart's attempt to give her back what the world took. So, I hold the story tenderly, even as I set it down. Because, and this is the hardest thing I'll say to you tonight, the truth is not lighter than the theft. The truth is heavier. Let me clear the flattering pieces away, one at a time, the way you gently correct someone you both loved. You may have heard that there were manuscripts signed Einstein Marity, both their names, proof of partnership. There were not. No such signed manuscripts exist. Marity is simply the Hungarian form of marriage, her own name, added by an old Swiss custom to her husband's. It points to one author, Albert, not two. A quirk of paperwork, garbled by later storytellers into a co-signature that was never there. You've heard our work on relative motion. We just held that letter up to the light together, 1901. 4 years early. The ether, not relativity. And there was the little word I asked you to remember a while back, the we, in her letter about the capillarity paper. We also sent a copy to Boltzmann. I promised you we'd need it, so here it is, held honestly. That we is real. It is not nothing. But look at what it is and what it isn't. It is the private language of two people who, in those years, did everything together, read together, argued together, sent their little papers out into the world together. A wife's "we," written to a friend, warm and unguarded. And the paper it spoke of went out into the world under his name alone. That is the whole truth of it. Not a stolen credit hiding in a pronoun. Not proof she held the pen. Just the quiet evidence of a shared life of the mind, which the record does show, and which no honest person should take from her, and, beside it, the single name on the page, which the record also shows. Hold them both. She would have understood, I think, better than anyone, that two true things can sit in the same sentence and ache. You may have heard that the Nobel Prize money was a secret payment, hush money for stolen work. It was not. It was a divorce settlement, negotiated in 1918, before he'd even won the prize. It was security. Money for her and for their two sons. Not a royalty for a theory. We'll come to it properly later. And you've heard, perhaps, that she did all his math. That one comes from a single unreliable source, and it is quietly contradicted by something we already know, something that costs me to repeat, that the mathematics component was the very subject that failed her twice and closed her career. The woman the myth calls his secret mathematician was failed by the world at mathematics. There's grief enough in that alone. There was even a television documentary back in 2003 that pushed the whole legend as hard as it could be pushed. And its own interviewed experts turned around and disowned it. The broadcaster later found it had breached its own standards and pulled it. So here is where the settled scholarship stands. The careful people Starkel and Martinez, Esterson and Cassidy and Seamay, who have spent their lives in these documents. There is no documentary evidence that Mileva contributed any identifiable content to the 1905 papers. She was his closest intellectual companion, his first sounding board, a trained physicist whose own career was fed, year by year, quietly into his. And now hear why I called the truth heavier. Because the myth, the robbery, the stolen equations, the myth actually shrinks her. Do you see it? It makes her worth something borrowed. It says, she only matters if we can prove she secretly did his work. It measures her whole life against his ruler. But the documented truth is so much larger and so much sadder than that. She was not robbed of a paper. She was erased of a life. Here was a genuine physicist, the equal grade, the shared desk, the mind trained to read the hidden order of things, and she was never once, in all her years, simply allowed to be one. Not robbed by a thief in the night. Erased by an era so vast and so ordinary that it could not even imagine her. And she paid for that erasure, quietly, without complaint, for 40 years. The conspiracy, you see, is the easier grief. It gives us a villain to hate and a wrong to set right. This, the real one, is harder to hold because there's no one to punish, There's only a woman and a world that had no room for her, and all the work she was never allowed to do. I find myself wondering, sitting here with you in the low light, which is the greater unkindness? To be forgotten entirely, or to be remembered as someone you never claimed to be? I don't have the answer. I only know that Mileva suffered both. Because what the era took from her next was not a theory. It was the marriage itself. And no reckoning, however honest, however tender, can give that back. The fame came for Albert the way weather comes for a valley. Slowly at first, then all at once, and from every direction. Between about 1905 and 1911, the young man no university had wanted became the young man every university wanted. The professorships arrived, the invitations, the conferences, where the great names of physics leaned in to hear what he thought. The homage of a world waking up all at once to the size of the mind in front of it. And Mileva watched it happen from inside the house. Now, I want you to hear how she watched, because it tells you everything about the woman. There is no bitterness in her, not at first. There's generosity. In the September of 1909, she writes to her friend Helene Savage that Albert is now regarded, in her own proud words, as the best of the German-speaking physicists. And then, I am very happy for his success, because he fully deserves it. Happy for him. He deserves it. She means it, and it's true. But listen to the very next breath. Because in the same letter, she adds one small hope, so quiet, you could almost miss it. I only hope, she writes, that fame does not have a harmful effect on his humanity. I'll not tell you what to feel about that line. I'll only lay it down in front of you and let you sit with it a moment, because she did not yet know how prophetic she was being. She only hoped. The way you hope about weather, you can already feel changing. And then, the winter of 1909 into 1910, she finds the words for it. The words this whole story turns on. Writing again to Helene about her husband and his gathering glory, Mileva says, with that kind of fame, he does not have much time left for his wife. And then, the image. The one I want you to carry with you all the way to the end tonight. With notoriety, one gets the pearl, the other, the box. The pearl and the box. Sit inside that a moment, nightlings, because it is one of the truest things anyone ever said about being married to greatness. There's the pearl, the treasure, the luminous thing the whole world reaches for, the thing they put behind glass and travel miles to see. And there's the box. The plain container it arrived in. The thing that held the pearl and shaped it and kept it safe in the dark for all those years, and that everyone sets aside without a thought the instant the pearl is lifted out. She knew which one she was. She had known, I think, for a while. On the 28th of July, 1910, in Zurich, their second son was born. Edward. They called him Tete. And now there were 2 boys in the house, 2 small lives, a whole household, orbiting a man who was himself beginning to orbit the entire world. And here I have to be careful and fair, the way I've tried to be all night, because this is where it would be so easy to turn Albert into a monster, and he was not a monster. Not here. What was happening to him was not, yet, cruelty. It was gravity. Something magnificent had begun growing inside that man, something genuinely, historically enormous, and it was growing so large and pulling so hard that there was simply less and less room left over for anyone else. Less room for a wife. Less room for a marriage. Not because he'd decided to be cold, because the thing inside him was eating the space. And if you have ever loved someone whose attention drifted somewhere you could not follow, a career, a calling, a brightness that had room for the world, but somehow not for you, then you already know exactly the room Mileva was standing in. The lamp still lit, the dinner still made, and the person across the table present and utterly gone. If you're only listening tonight, by the way, and most of you are, and that's just as it should be, that's what this fireside is for. I'll only say the video version is worth your eyes some evening, when you're not chasing sleep. The animators and editors pour a great deal of quiet love into those frames, and Mileva, of all people, deserves to be truly seen. But close your eyes now, if they're heavy. The words will carry you. Because the box was about to be emptied entirely. And what would come to replace the love letters, the Johnny, the Doxel, the creature who is my equal, was a numbered list. I'm going to tell this chapter plainly, almost without commentary, because the thing itself is the devastation, and it needs no help from me. Around 1912, Albert renewed his affection for his cousin, a woman named Elsa Lowenthal. I'll say no more of it than that. It belongs to them. The move to Berlin followed. And the marriage, by then, was ash that simply hadn't yet noticed it was ash. Then came July of 1914 in Berlin, and a piece of paper. Their friend Fritz Haber was trying to mediate between them, to hold the thing together somehow, and out of that came a document. Conditions. Written down. Numbered. In Albert's own hand. These are, very nearly, his words. I'm going to read them to you now. She would make sure his clothes and his laundry were kept in good order. She would see that he received his 3 meals regularly in his room. His bedroom and his study would be kept neat, and his desk was to be left for his use, and his use only. She would renounce all personal relations with him except those required for the sake of appearances. She would expect no intimacy and reproach him for nothing. She would stop talking to him if he requested it. She would leave his room, his bedroom, or his study immediately and without protest if he requested it. And she would undertake not to belittle him in front of their children. That is the list. That is the whole of what a marriage had come down to, written out like the terms of a lease. Now, 14 years before he wrote, "You will stop talking to me if I request it," this same hand, the very same hand, wrote to this same woman that she was a creature who is my equal, as strong and independent as I am, his equal, and then leave the room without protest if I request it. Say them both, hold them both in the air at once, and then let's say nothing for a moment. She accepted it. She did. Briefly, because what else was there in that moment to do? But something in her would not live inside those numbered lines for long. And on the 29th of July, 1914, the day after the First World War broke out across Europe, Mileva gathered her two sons and boarded a train and left Berlin for Zurich. Think of the size of that week. A marriage collapsing and a continent collapsing in the very same few days. The whole world tearing along its seams, and one woman, quietly, carrying two little boys away from a man who had written her a list. I'll give Albert his due here, because a story you can't trust is worth nothing, and I'd rather you trust me. He did not abandon them to nothing. He paid support, around 5,600 Reichsmark a year, and by the accounts we have, he largely honored it. He was cold. He was, in this chapter, as cold as he ever gets in our story. But he was not, even now, a demon. He was a man in the grip of something too large for him, following the only script his era had ever handed a husband, and never once thinking to ask whether there might be another way. That is the sadder truth, isn't it? Not a villain. Just a man who could not imagine better. What was left to divide now was money, and the boys, and, strangest of all, a prize he had not yet even won. The divorce was finalized on the 14th of February, 1919, in Zurich, after 5 long years of living apart. And it had buried in it one of the strangest clauses I've ever come across. Negotiated the year before, in 1918, the money from a future Nobel Prize, a prize Albert had not yet been awarded, was pledged to Mileva, held in trust for their sons. Think about what that clause reveals about each of them. He was so certain the prize was coming that he could sit down and bargain with it, spend it before it existed. And she was so practical, so worn to the bone by then, that she accepted the promise of an award not yet given, because a promise was more than she had. And I'll hold the discipline we agreed on back in the trial chapter. This was not payment for stolen work. It was security. A worn-down mother taking what safety she could get for her children. Nothing more romantic than that, and nothing more damning either. He married Elsa that June. And now, before the weather turns, and it will turn, I want to give you the one chapter of Mileva's later life where she gets to act. Where she is nobody's box. Because it happened, and it lasted, and she earned it. The Nobel Prize for 1921 arrived, paid out in 1922, something on the order of 121,000 Swedish crowns. A fortune. And Mileva did not merely receive it the way a dependent receives an allowance. She deployed it. In 1924, she took that money and she bought 3 apartment buildings in Zurich. 3. She became a landlord. A woman of property, running her own accounts, managing her own tenants, collecting her own rents, keeping 3 roofs and her whole household standing upright on the strength of her own decisions. Do you feel it? The woman the world refused a diploma. The woman refused a career, refused a fair marriage, refused nearly every door she ever stood at. That same woman, in her 40s, is now managing a small property empire with a cool and capable hand. For years, not one brave breath, but years of real independence. The mind that was never once allowed to do its physics turned out to be quietly, formidably good at the hardest arithmetic there is, the arithmetic of survival. Let her have this. She was, for a real span of her life, standing squarely on her own 2 feet. And then the weather turned. The crash came in 1929, and the world's money went to ash, and the rents stopped coming in. At the very same time, the costs of caring for her son Edward were beginning to climb. We'll come to Edward, and it will be the heaviest thing tonight. So the buildings began to go. She sold 2 of them, and by 1939, to escape losing everything to foreclosure, she had to transfer even her own home, the house she lived in, into Albert's name, keeping only the right to go on living inside it. Do you hear the shape of that? The last room she had left in the world, and her name came off the door of even that one. She, who'd spent her whole life fighting to be let into rooms, ended up living in the one that was left, as a permitted guest on someone else's paper. To keep herself going, she gave private lessons, mathematics, and piano to the neighborhood, coin by coin. And it was, in these grinding years, in 1925, that Albert wrote her perhaps the cruelest thing he ever put on paper. She had spoken, once, of writing her memoirs, of telling her own story. And he wrote back, "No one would pay the least attention at all to your rubbish if the man with whom you are dealing had not perchance accomplished something important. One should then be modest and shut up. I advise you to do so. Your rubbish. Be modest. Shut up." And here is who Mileva Maric actually was, set right beside that letter. Because a few years later, in 1929, a friend of hers leaked their story to a newspaper. The marriage, the fame, the private griefs, all of it. And Mileva's response was not fury. It was this: such releases are not my style at all. Sit with that. She had, in her keeping, the story of the century. The private truth about the most famous man alive. She could have sold it. She could have answered, "Shut up," with a headline that shook the world. And she declined. Quietly, on principle, because it was not her style. The man's genius the world would never stop discussing. And her dignity, a dignity that size, the world never even noticed. And somewhere underneath all of it, under the buildings bought and the buildings lost, under the support payments and the tallied rents and the coins from the piano lessons, there was one subtraction that never appeared in any ledger. A quarter of a century before, there had been a little girl named Liesel. And grief, you know, has a way of totaling itself up quietly in the background, precisely when everything else in a life is being repossessed. Come with me now into the deepest room of this whole story. Walk softly. This is the chamber where love stops being a feeling and becomes, instead, a thing you simply do every day for years, whether it is returned or not. I want you to meet Edward first, as he was, before the shadow came. Because he was so much before. They called him Tete, and he was, by every account, a luminous boy. Musically gifted, he played, and he felt music the way some people feel weather, all the way through the body. He wrote poetry. He had a quick, deep, searching mind, the true child of two searching minds. And as he grew, he found his calling, and it was a beautiful one. He wanted to understand the human soul. He fell in love with the work of Sigmund Freud, kept the master's photograph on his wall, the way another young man might have kept a picture of an athlete or a saint. And he enrolled in medicine at the University of Zurich, intending to become a psychiatrist, a healer of troubled minds, the brilliant son of brilliant parents, aiming himself with all his gifts at the alleviation of human suffering. Hold that picture of him, the music, the poems, Freud on the wall, the whole lit road ahead. Because I have to tell you what came next, and I would rather you love him first. Around 1930, 1931, when Edward was only about 20, schizophrenia took him. It came the way that illness so often comes, in the very years when a young life is supposed to be opening outward, and it closed him instead. The studies ended. The road to healing other minds ended, because his own mind had become the thing that needed healing. And there was, in that era, so terribly little that anyone knew how to do. By 1932, 1933, he was a patient at the Burg Huxley, the great psychiatric clinic in Zurich. And the treatments of that age were what they were: the insulin shock, the electroconvulsion, the desperate blunt instruments of a medicine, still half in the dark. His own brother, Hans Albert, came to believe that those very treatments may have damaged him further, that the cures, such as they were, took something from him that the illness had left behind. And Mileva tried everything. Everything. She was a mother now, against a wall higher than any her empire had ever built, and she threw herself at it with the whole of her formidable will. She sought out the best help she could find. She even reached toward the circle of Carl Jung himself, appealing for anything, any insight, any hand that might reach her son where she could not. There was no petition she would not write for this. But this was one door that no signature on earth could open. And in 1933, the other parent left. Albert emigrated to America that year, and I'll be fair to the circumstances. because the circumstances were real and they were enormous. It was 1933. The world was darkening toward another war. For a man of Einstein's name and heritage, staying in Europe was becoming genuinely dangerous, and America was safety, and it was work, and it was the future. All of that is true. And after a final terrible breakdown, Edward reportedly told his father that he hated him. Words torn out of an illness, not a heart, but words all the same. Albert crossed the ocean. And he and his son never saw each other again. Never. Not once more in all the years that were left. The father an ocean away, behind the doors of his fame and his exile and his second life. And the son behind the door of the ward. I won't excuse it. An ocean is a fact, and a war is a fact, but a child is also a fact, and a father can write, and can send for word, and can carry the ache of an unhealed goodbye without ever crossing back. I'll only set it down, the way I've set everything down tonight, and let it be as heavy as it is. Because while the father was away, the mother stayed. And this is the part that history barely troubled to write down at all. 15 years of it, nearly unrecorded, because there was nothing in it the world found worth remembering. No discovery. No headline. Just a graying woman, growing older, making her way again and again to the same clinic. Visiting, paying, selling her buildings, one by one, to keep paying. Sitting in waiting rooms, learning the particular geography of a place you never wanted to know. Which corridor, which chair, how the light falls in the afternoon on the ward where your child now lives. This is love, when the feeling is not enough, and nothing is enough, and you go anyway. Love as simply not leaving. Love as the thing that shows up on Tuesday, and then again on the Tuesday after that, for 15 years, asking nothing back. There is a whole life in those waiting rooms that no one ever saw. And I'll tell you the thought that haunts me most, sitting here. The woman in that chair, year after year, aging in the corridor light, she was still, underneath all of it, the fifth woman in the lecture hall. A mind trained, as few minds ever are, to read the hidden order of things, to find the pattern behind the surface of the world. And that mind was now bent, entirely and forever, on the one problem that had no solution and never would. And in all those years, in all those rooms, no one ever once thought to ask her what she was thinking about. The ward door was the one room she chose to keep returning to. The one door in a life full of doors that had opened and closed on her, that she opened herself over and over because her boy was on the other side of it. And I'll tell you the end of Edward now, gently and quickly, so it doesn't ambush you later. He would outlive his mother. He remained at the Huxley to the end and died there in 1965 at 55 years old. He outlasted the vigil that was kept for him. But that is ahead of us. Because Mileva carried him as far as her own body could go. And in the summer of 1948, her body reached the end of the road. And we have been in that room before. Zurich. The 4th of August, 1948. We are back where we began. But everything is different now, because now you know her. A small apartment on a quiet street. An old woman, 72 years old, who has suffered a stroke. The neighbors on the stair, who knew her only a little. The private woman with the limp, who gave the piano lessons and the mathematics lessons. They are still there, still not quite knowing who she was. But you know. And so, at last, every image from that first cold night can come back and lay down its meaning. The limp. You know where the limp began now. In title, in a schoolyard, in a body that marked her out before her mind ever could, and in the teasing of children who could not see what she carried. The piano lessons. You know now that the piano was not a hobby. It was survival. Coin by coin, it was how a woman who had once scored what Einstein scored kept a roof over her head after the buildings were gone, and even her own front door bore another man's name. Her worn hands. You know what those hands did? The notebooks copied out in her own handwriting, the lecture notes, the draft to plank, the household held together. The son visited, and visited, and visited across 15 years of waiting rooms. And the silence. The great reserve the neighbors mistook for coldness. You know now that the silence was chosen. That she'd been offered the loudest story of the century and had answered, "Such releases are not my style at all." That her quiet was not emptiness. It was dignity, kept whole to the very end. She died there, at 72, impoverished, worn down by a lifetime of standing outside doors, and by a love that had asked everything of her. And she was, at the last, a woman the world had entirely mislaid. And then, history did the thing that makes the title of this story true. Because sometime around the 1970s, likely over nothing grander than unpaid fees, the marker on Mileva Marich's grave at the Nordheim Cemetery in Zurich was removed. And with it, the location of her grave was simply lost. Sit in that a moment. Let it be as stark as it is. The fifth woman in the room, the girl who had spent her whole life fighting to be let into rooms, ended, in the end, with no room at all. Not even the small dark one that every person is finally granted. Even the door in the earth had lost her name. That, nightlings, is this whole story pressed into a single image, a woman erased so thoroughly that the world could not even find where it had put her. But hold on, because the story does not end in the dark. It turns one last time. In 1986 and 87, those hidden love letters finally surfaced. The Johnny, the Doxel, the creature who is my equal. And out of them, all at once, came Mileva. And came Liesel, the daughter no one had known to mourn. The letters gave her back. In 2004, a researcher named Petar Stojanovic went looking and found her grave again, located the lost woman in the lost ground. And in June of 2009, a memorial stone was dedicated over it at last. a marker, a name in stone where a name was meant to be. The world came back for her. 60 years too late, but it came. There's a rueful little truth in it I can't help but notice. It took humanity less time to confirm the theory of relativity than it took us to find the grave of the woman who lived beside its author. Make of that what you will. And this, remembering, is not the work of institutions in the end. It's the work of ordinary people who simply decide that someone should not be forgotten. So, if there is a name like hers on your own heart tonight, a person or a moment from history you wish someone would sit and tell properly, in the dark, some night by a fire, leave it in the comments below. Tell me who you'd like remembered, or a story of your own you love. Because that, quite literally, is how the forgotten get found. Someone, somewhere, finally says the name out loud. Which leaves only the question we began with. The one I promised to answer honestly. Why had you never heard of her? Let me answer it properly now. You never heard of her, nightlings, for a reason that is almost unbearably simple. You never heard of her because she fit no story the world wanted to tell. She was not a laureate, she won no prize, published no landmark under her own name, and so the history of science, which keeps its ledger by trophies, had no column for her, and skipped past. And she was merely the first wife, and so the great glittering legend of Albert Einstein, the hair and the tongue and the equation on the t-shirt, simply trimmed her away, the way a legend trims anything that complicates its shine. Forgotten from both directions at once. Too ordinary for science, too inconvenient for myth. And then, this is the cruelest turn, when the culture finally did reach back for her, decades later, wanting to make it right, it grabbed the wrong version of her. It reached past the real woman and seized a fantasy, a novel that cast her as the secret true author of relativity, a documentary that overreached so badly, its own experts publicly disowned it. First, she was forgotten. Then she was misremembered. And I want you to feel that both of those are a kind of erasing, that to be remembered as someone you never were is only the second way of not being seen. So, let us do the honest thing instead. Let us clear the myth away entirely and count what actually remains, slowly, the way you'd count old coins into your palm, one at a time, feeling the weight of each. She was the fifth woman ever admitted to that room, the only woman among the six. She earned, in physics, the very same grade as Albert Einstein. She was the first sounding board of the miracle year, the trained mind across the table, in the evenings, in her own handwriting. She was the mother who stayed, who turned her whole formidable will toward a son who could not be saved and did not leave for 15 years. And she was the woman who, when the whole world's attention was finally hers for the taking, looked at it and said, "Such releases are not my style at all." That is what remains. Not borrowed from anyone. Hers. And the world has, slowly, begun to set down markers for it. There is a memorial plaque now on the wall of the house at Huttenstrasse, 62, where she once lived, placed in 2005. There are busts of her, one in Sremska Mitrovica, one at the University of Novi Sad. And in title, the little town in the flat green country where the girl outside the door was born, there is a school that now carries her name. Let that last one land, because there is a quiet symmetry in it, almost too perfect to be real. The child who once needed a man's signed and stamped petition merely to be permitted into a classroom is now the name written above the classroom door. And that, I think, is where the whole story finally turns itself over. Because all her life, the door was something she had to be let through. The gymnasium door, the lecture hall door, the door of a marriage, and the door of the historical record itself. Every one of them, a room where someone else, somewhere, decided whether Mileva Maric might enter. But tonight, the motif turns over in our hands. Because it turns out the only door that ever truly mattered was never made of wood or stone or examiner's ink. It was only ever this, someone, somewhere, finally saying her name and meaning it. And tonight, in the dark, that someone is you. You are the room she was let into, at last. This quiet act, you, listening, in the low light, letting a forgotten woman's whole life pass gently through your mind, before you sleep. This is the recognition she went without for 100 years. You have opened the one door that was ever really hers to be given. So let us hold her line up one final time. The pearl and the box. The world gave Albert the pearl, the luminous thing behind glass, the treasure the crowd still traveled to see. And it gave Mileva the box. But think now on what a box actually is. A box is what you keep things in. And she kept everything. She kept the letters. She kept the vigil in the waiting rooms. She kept her sons. She kept her dignity and her silence and her refusal to sell a single word of a story she alone possessed. The pearl was only ever admired. The box did all the holding. And if you take one thing from her into your sleep tonight, let it be this. Your worth was never the applause. It never was. Most of what actually holds this world together is uncredited, done quietly, by unseen people in rooms no one photographs. So, honor the unseen ones in your own life while they can still hear you. Thank them. And if you are one of them, if you are the box, and someone else got the pearl, know that your keeping was never worth less than their shining. We leave one door open on purpose. Liesel. Somewhere, perhaps, that little girl lived a whole long life, married, grew old, died, never once knowing whose daughter she was. History cannot say, and I will not pretend it can. Some doors stay closed, and we honor them, at last, simply by admitting that we cannot open them. So let them all rest now, the forces in this story laid down without rancor. The era could not see her. The man could not make room for her. Fate did not spare her. And memory, when it came, misfiled her. And yet, tonight, you know her name. Mileva Maric. We began, you and I, in a small room with a dying woman the world had misplaced. And we end knowing the truest thing this story had to teach, that no life is ever small, only unwitnessed. He was not a demon. She was not a saint. And the era was not a villain twirling its mustache in the dark. It was something worse than that, and quieter. It was ordinary. It simply could not imagine her, and so it did not. That is why this story matters, on an ordinary night like tonight. Because the doors are still standing, all of them, everywhere. And so are the people waiting just outside them. And so are the quiet ones, all around you, holding up someone else's ladder with their own two tired arms. Perhaps tomorrow you'll notice one of them. Perhaps you'll say the small thing that lets them know they were seen. And if, somewhere in Serbia, in a very old family album, there is a photograph of a little girl that nobody can quite place, a child with someone's eyes, and no name written underneath, well, we will let her rest there, unbothered, among her own. Sleep is a door too, nightlings. And this one is always open to you. Rest now, where the forgotten are remembered, since you made it this far. Sleep now, nightlings, and wake up, as always, a little stronger and a little wiser. The story is done, but yours continues.